Today we're going to talk about how to library, otherwise how to research, how to look for articles on the internet in the library, on the internet in general, how to ask questions. One thing I found is that um, classes seem to have trouble asking questions, and I think it's another of those things that happen when you leave high school and you come to university. And what happens is that you're used to regurgitating and you're used to not thinking for yourselves. And so the idea of asking questions is difficult because you have to be in a different headspace, as opposed to just finding the right answer. This is not at all about finding the right answer. This is about having fun. This is about being able to explore and wonder and be intellectually curious. And this is the life you want. This is way more fun than just trying to find the right answer. And so what I want to teach you is the skills to find questions that then you can try to answer. And this is where your intellectual life and your university life can really become fulfilling, transferring these skills across the board. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is look at the context of what we're doing, which I kind of just gave you, but I really want you to see that this is a critical skill for the rest of your life. It's not just about this class. Learning how to do research is a critical skill. You're probably going to use it at some point in your life. You're probably going to say, I wonder what that is, and then Google it. And then you might have more questions than a simple Google search can answer. And that's where you need these skills. So you'll find articles in the literature. If you remember, we talked about what the literature is. It's basically the body of research that is out there. And we're specifically looking at the psychological literature, or at least the medical literature, but probably with a psychological bend to it. And so that's the literature that we're referring to. When you write your research proposal, you need to do some research to talk about the background of what you're investigating. You can't just have a question without some background in terms of, well, what's been done already? And what do you know about these things? You have to be informed to ask questions. And the information is shown in your introduction to the research proposal. And so just like scientific articles have an introduction, your research proposal has to also have an introduction, and you'll use research articles that you're finding to help build that introduction, but more importantly, to help build your question. You want your question to be an informed question, not a question without information supporting it. It may be that people have already answered your question, and so then you need to do something else that now you have a new question about, because now the question is no longer relevant because it has been answered. And so what you want to do is learn about your topic. When you learn about any topic, you can start to have questions. And again, this is training for the brain. And I get it that I think a lot of you have never learned how to have questions. And so I would like that to change, because it's way more fun to have questions. So read in the literature about your topics. Read until you come across some things and you think, gosh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. I'm going to give you a couple examples today, and we're going to really walk through how to find articles. So if you look at the introduction piece of the research proposal, remember we looked at what makes up an article. You've got the introduction, the methods section, the results section, the discussion, the references. And so right now what we're focusing on is the introduction. And of course, in the introduction, you're going to have all these references that point you toward the logic that flows through your study. So what you want to do is read the articles that are valuable for building your research study. You don't have to read all of the articles. The idea here is not to be exhaustive. Exhaustive means that, not exhausted, although sometimes it results in that, but exhaustive means that you're looking at all of the things. And so if I do an exhaustive survey of my refrigerator, I will list every single thing in my refrigerator. If I do a non-exhaustive survey, I might open the door and glance in there and see what looks easy to me. So that's non-exhaustive. When you write a review article, which you're not doing here, then that's when you want to be really much more exhaustive, because you're basically saying, I'm going to cover everything that's out there. And so you have to be able to find everything that's out there. These proposals are not meant to be exhaustive reviews of the literature. So you're not doing a lit review. What you're doing is an introduction, which is different. The introduction says, here's the stuff that you need to know about the background for my question and why my question's interesting, and the stuff that you need to know to make what I'm doing make sense to you. So it's relevant. It's pointed towards supporting your research design. Okay. So you're going to read the articles that are valuable for learning, valuable for developing your hypotheses. If you think you can just gather articles and skim the abstract and put them in your study, kind of like as a quotation, you're not going to be satisfied. You're going to be frustrated. You will feel confused, and this won't be fun. So I'm telling you, you have to read the articles, even if it's hard. You can skip the results section. You can struggle through it. That's fine. Get what you can. Read the abstracts to give you a sense of it. We did that for our integration exercise. But at this point, when you're looking for articles that are about your research topic, you want to read the whole article. Even if you don't quite get it, just do your best. So when you write this introduction, points to remember, it sets up your study. So it's not an exhaustive review, it just sets up your study. It's a logical progression of ideas. And so the first thing you need to do, and I will in the future give you some very specific hints on how to structure your introduction. There's some in your lab manual too. But the first thing is you need to learn about your topic. And so here is where it's kind of like you just jump in the pool and you start looking around and seeing what is there before you start gathering sources for your introduction. So you want to kind of get a sense of what's out there, a sense of what you're looking for, and then you can think, okay, this, and this article, these are the ones that are really relevant for my introduction. And so I'm going to include those. This one I looked at, but it's not relevant, so I'm not even going to include it. So just because you looked at something doesn't mean that you need to cite it. The only articles that you cite, in other words, include in your references and include in the text, in text citations, those are only the articles that are relevant for your study. It's not a bibliography at the end. It's not like, well, here's all the things you could read. It's here are the sources that I found relevant to my study. So I'm going to help you figure out how to find those sources today. So you need to look, probably you need to look at various search engines. No one search engine has all of the things, but I'll tell you what the pros and cons are for some of them, and you can do a pretty good job with one or two of them. First of all, let's look at one you don't need library access for. So I know being away from campus is a challenge. When you're on campus, it's easy to have access to the library because you're on the SVU whole internet thing and it's there. But now you're not, and you may find it difficult to sign in to get access to the library, or I don't know, you might just not want to. So let me help you with some sources that you don't need to go through SVU to get. And then we'll talk about what you can do through the library. Again, pros and cons. And so the pros for this, for PubMed.gov, is it's available anywhere. If you have access to the internet, you have access to PubMed.gov, and also PubMed Central. Those two things are available anywhere. Google Scholar also. And so if you go to PubMed.gov, which everybody can do, this is what you're going to see. Now, if you've been to PubMed.gov in the last few weeks or a month ago or a year ago, it's changed. It just very, very recently changed And so this is the new screen that you see when you go there. If you scroll down, then you get to this part where you can see Find, and you can click on Advanced Search. Now you can just search normally in the search bar. That's fine. You can do that just fine. If you want an advanced search, which I would suggest doing, I'm going to show you how to do this. It's not hard at all. And so you build your search. And so what you're doing is you're putting in a search term, and then you're connecting it to another search term. And you connect it with, let's see, I'm going to go forward. You connect it with words like, actually, let's go forward here to here. And then we'll go back, and then we'll go forward again. Just not confusing at all, right? So you're using what they call Boolean logic. Boolean logic is just basically, how can I use words to connect my searches so that I get exactly what I want, or as close to what I want as possible? And so the main words to think about here are and, not, and or. And so I'll show you how this works. So if you're at this advanced place, advanced search, what you do is you enter a search term right here in this area. You enter that search term, and then you say add. Then you can enter another search term, and you can say add, or you can say or not. And I'll actually, let me show you how that works. When you're using the words to search, you want to put some thought into what you're searching for. So let's say you're looking for ADHD. And so you would want to put in ADHD, but you might also want to put in attention and concentration and focus and ADD. You might want to put in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, all of those words, although most people will put in ADHD, and that will be fine for your search. You can be too broad, you can be too narrow. You just have to really think about the words you're using for your search. This is the beginning of your literature search, and words make a huge difference. Some databases can help you by suggesting the right word, but PubMed is not one of these. If you go through the library, PsycInfo is one of those. And that can, I'll talk to you a little bit about that. That can really be helpful if you want to have like words that are indexed or a suggestion. So basically, if I was in PsycInfo and I typed in ADHD, then it would come up with a search term that it knows is going to include all of the things about ADHD. And so I click on that and I use that word. You could try that and then go back and search PubMed with those same words. You might get different results. We'll talk a little bit also about what that is. I don't want to give you all the things and overwhelm you too much. So at first, what we're starting off with, go to pubmed.gov and just check it out. Just give some thought to playing around with the system, okay? So here is where we are, and here is the beginning of one example. I got this from one of you from your ideas that you turned in Friday. So the idea was, does chocolate affect sleep? And so I thought, well, that's a great one to demonstrate using pubmed.gov. And so the first thing I do is I build my search and I think about all the different words for chocolate. So you've got chocolate, you have cocoa, and you have cacao. Those are all the words that I thought of. A lot of that is based on my experience in terms of just knowing stuff, and then a little bit in terms of the literature, because I did a fair amount of research on cacao and some health benefits, and I thought, let's just throw that in there and see. And so the first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm searching all of those things, not just things that say chocolate and cacao, or chocolate or cocoa. And cocoa. I want or. And so if I say or, then if it says chocolate, or if it says cocoa, or if it says cacao, all of those things are put together. If instead I said chocolate and cacao, then the only articles I would get would be the ones that combined both of those terms. I don't want that. I want all of those articles. So I say or. because I want anything that might have chocolate in it, or anything that might have cacao in it, or anything that might have cocoa in it. So I put all those together, and then I click add. And then it goes into my little box, and I'm ready for putting in the next query. And the next thing I want to look at is sleep. And so I do the same thing in this box. The box where it says right now chocolate or cacao or cocoa. I also then write in sleep after I've hit add. So we've got what I've written in that you see on your screen. I hit add, then I type in sleep, and then I hit add again. And then I can search that. So here's what happens. You can see now that it's down in the bottom, the search query. So I've got chocolate or cocoa or cacao and sleep. And so sleep has to be part of any one of those other things to show up in this search. What you will see is that that isn't quite as straightforward as it you would think it would be, because some articles may mention sleep sort of incidentally, or they may mention chocolate sort of incidentally, and that might not really be a thing. And so you have to look through all the articles. You've got a good sense of a beginning, but it doesn't mean that all those articles are relevant. So the first thing we do is we start looking through the articles. You look at what's relevant based on the title and based on the abstract, depending on how exhaustive you want to be. And so some things that may not look recognizable, you might want to investigate a little bit. So here's the first article that popped up. There's lots and lots of articles, but here's the first one that popped up. Flavanol-rich chocolate acutely improves arterial function and working memory performance, counteracting the effects of sleep deprivation. And so we're looking at the health benefits of probably straight up cacao, or chocolate that is not like, I don't want to say a brand name, but your basic milk and sugar rich chocolate. You're looking at a flavanol rich chocolate that improves the effects of sleep deprivation. Well, I kind of know a little bit about this because cacao beans and chocolate without a lot of added sugar have tremendous health benefits. Very cool. And so I'm thinking that's probably what this is talking about. And maybe the person who wrote in, does chocolate affect your sleep, was really not thinking about it this way. I'm pretty sure you're thinking about it as, I'm going to have a chocolate bar before I go to bed. Does this affect my sleep or not? So this may not be relevant in terms of, does chocolate affect my sleep? But it is relevant in terms of, hey, in some ways, a good chocolate may help me, maybe have some benefits. Now I have more information. Here's the next article. I'm looking for articles about chocolate and sleep, and what comes up is caffeine, because that's really the issue here, is that chocolate contains caffeine, and then I'm sure the sugar aspect of it isn't super positive for your sleep either. So I look at the abstract to try and figure out, is chocolate even involved here? Is sleep involved here? They're talking about the safety of caffeine. And so here down at the bottom, you can see this red circle around sleep. And so what we know is caffeine does affect sleep. It can be harmful. So that's another direction to go in. And if you look up here on the right kind of top, where it's yellow highlighted, that's where you can click on to get the full text. So instead of just having the abstract, you've got the entire article. That can be really useful. That's really what you want to do, is get the whole article so you can read that. So you keep going, you find more and more articles, you try and make sense of what's out there. Some articles you'll start reading and you're like, this looks good. And then you're like, no, it doesn't, it's nothing. And some articles you'll think, I don't know. And then all of a sudden it sparks something and you're thinking, well, that's very interesting. I'm going to take a look at that. So when I looked a little bit more into what it said under my search for chocolate, cacao, or cocoa, and sleep, what I found was like this whole area that I didn't know about. Some receptor sites that may be that may affect your sleep, that have to do with habitual reward-based eating, and some new drugs that are being. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. but it's not relevant to my research. So we have to figure out, what am I really talking about? Now that I know more, am I talking about cacao, or am I talking about like standard chocolate bar with plenty of milk and sugar? And then questions happen like, does dark chocolate act differently? Does it have more or less caffeine? I can look that up. Do sleep effects differ if you're using dark chocolate or milk chocolate or nothing? Well, right there, that's an experimental study. You have 3 different arms in the study. One would be people with dark, people with milk, and then people with nothing. So those are your 3 different arms, and then you're looking at the effects on sleep. So you have at least one question, potentially many questions. And so let's back it up again. Let's say, what are we really looking for? We're looking for the science-based articles. We're not looking for Joanne's blog. We're looking for science, peer-reviewed journal articles. That's what we're looking for. Often you can find books, chapters with scientific references, and so you know that those are scientifically based. Not all books with references are scientifically based. Sometimes the references are really poor. They may not be really relevant. They may just be there for show. Most of the time, though, you can trust that if the book is scientifically referenced, you know that it probably is more scientifically based. Sometimes you can find blogs that are useful, but I wouldn't use those as references because they're not scientific. Instead, I always use those to spark ideas or knowledge and think, oh, that blog really explained the difference between dark chocolate and milk chocolate. Now I understand enough to have better search terms. Now I'm going to go back to the literature. I'm going to go back to the literature and use those search terms. Okay, that makes sense? All right, so what is available for searching? Like we said, there's library-based searching, and then there's searching you can do just on any old internet anywhere. So the library-based sources that come from Von Cannon, you can get into 2 search engines. One of them is called PsycInfo, and one of them is called Medline. And those are search engines that are indexed. They're better than just searching on the internet because they only look at articles that are relevant to psychology or relevant to medicine in the larger piece. PubMed will index pretty much everything. So PubMed and Medline in many ways are very, very similar. It's just that Medline has the advantage of giving you search terms that will search for you, and PubMed doesn't have that advantage. So Medline is indexed and PubMed is not indexed in that way. If you want to look at other internet sources, and you're not going into the library to use that search, I'll tell you a little bit how to do that in a second. Then you do, of course, you can do PubMed, PubMed Central, and Google Scholar. The thing about PubMed Central that is cool is that it is only the full text article. So if you do any search on PubMed Central, the only results you get back are results that have the full text already. Now you can go search for the full text in the Von Cannon library, and they may have it. They may not have it, it's not guaranteed, but they likely will have most of those things. The thing about PubMed Central is, yeah, that makes it easy to find things that are full text. However, you're limited to only seeing the articles that are full text for free. So there are a lot of articles out there that are not full text for free, and they won't pop up in your search. And so if you're doing something that is super popular and easy to find a ton of resources, maybe PubMed Central would be good enough for the purposes of this research proposal, this sort of beginners kind of thing. Any time in the future when you're actually doing real research, writing real articles, PubMed Central will not be enough. But for now, if what you're doing is easy to find articles, maybe that will be enough. So some journal articles, sorry, let me move my face just for a second. I can't find it. Okay. Some journal articles have a free full access policy. And so all of the articles in that journal may be free to you. Those are the ones you would find, for example, on PubMed Central. You can also often find them just in the Google search or through Google Scholar. Some journals, you only get if you pay. And so that's what the library is doing. The library is paying for access to those journals. And so when you go through the library, then you can have access to those journals. And some free access journals are really good. Some are mediocre, some aren't that great. So if you look at abstracts versus full text, some search engines will link you to the article's citation or abstract. Some of them link you right to the full text of the article. So if you're using the library, it will tell you if it has the full text available. If you're using PubMed Central, PubMed Central, of course, gives you the article, but PubMed will tell you if the free article is available, so you will know. I think I just said that. So at the library, you have useful databases for, whoops, sorry, for searching. Okay, yeah, that's what I said. Useful databases for searching. There are people at that help desk in the Von Cannon Library, even though we're all online, they're still dying to help you, There's a guy there named Wyatt who is just so interested in helping you. And so if you contact them online, then they're a resource that you can use. If you go to the library and you get into the library, you can go to the menu for the library, and on the far right top, you can hit that little hamburger and you see, scroll down to databases. And then you can select psychology from the group of databases that come up. And it will just give you the databases that are relevant to psychology instead of all of the databases that are relevant to everybody. Medline, PsycInfo, two great options. If you go to PsycInfo, what you find are all the journals that are relevant to psychology, books, dissertation abstracts. When you search, the search engine in PsycInfo, like Medline, helps you by suggesting search terms. And then you can look up terms in their thesaurus, and they will help you with that. Medline, similar, also suggests terms for you to search. It has more articles than PsycInfo because anything that's relevant to psychology is what's in PsycInfo, but Medline would have all of the medical related articles. When you're doing your searching, you need to write down, copy and paste, put it into online you can find a citation manager kind of thing. You need to put in APA citations in your paper. So there is information in your lab manual on how to do that. We'll cover it again in the future. I just want to alert you to make sure that you save that information so that you can write in those citations. So when you're taking notes from the articles that you're getting and you're looking at building your research project, don't just take notes and forget about where they came from. You have to remember where those notes came from because you have to acknowledge that source. You have to back up anything you say with an article, pretty much. So let's look at just briefly how you do a citation. Every single idea that you come up with has to be sourced. You have to have some basis for it. So you can't say things like, more women than men are interested in trees. So you can't say that because you don't know. You need some sort of scientific reference to back that up. Now, I don't know of a reference. I'm just making stuff up for you. But so if you read an article that says, we did this study and we found out that tree interest varies depending on gender. And here's what it shows. And so you write that article down. And when you say that in your text, you say this thing about genders and tree preferences. Then you put in the citation. So you can say, this is where I got that information from. There are different styles of citing things. There's MLA style, which is common, and then there's APA style. APA style is the one that we're using here. This way you can show that your paper is backed by science. I'm going to put these guidelines in your modules for you so you can just access them straight, so you don't have to come here and copy all this down from the little lecture today. All right, then what you do is you've got all your ideas and you have their source. Back in the old days, what I used to do is I would have note cards and I would write the idea down and I would write the article down. That was the old days. You can do all of this easily on your computer, online, with programs. It is way easier now. So you have to remember to keep track of the information and where that source was, what the source of that information was as you're building your arguments. All right, so I hope this helped you get a sense for how to get into the literature and find things, how to think about questions, how to get more information about your study. So this is going to be very, very relevant as you start to write your introduction. You'll be writing your introduction over the next couple weeks as you refine it. And then you're also going to be writing other pieces and parts of your research proposal. And we're going to work on those every week until you're all done. We'll talk more tomorrow about finding measures. So that's the next big part of your research proposal that we'll discuss, and it will help you understand the whole idea of research design. Talk to you then.